Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this very special episode of GameSense tonight. Thank you all for watching on a different night than normal. We're sorry we had to change the day on you all, but with these district championships and having being on teams and they're competing, apparently our schedules don't always conflict with the show. But thank you so much for being here. This is our first of our two district championship specials, and we hope you really enjoy them. First off, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Symbotic. They're a great company. You could check them out on the internet. And they help us do the things that we like to do here on GameSense. So definitely check them out. We really appreciate all they do for us. First off, I'd like to shout out to our hosts tonight. We've got Stephanie behind the camera. And also we've got Evan Morrison, Ty Tremblay, who's drinking some water right now, Naveed Shaffa, and our special guest tonight, it's Nick Lawrence. Nick, why don't you introduce yourself for us a little bit?
Hey guys, I'm Nick Lawrence. A transplant Canadian in the state of Indiana right now, working for a little company you might know called AndyMark. I work as an engineering intern there, and I'm also an active mentor on Team 3940 Cybertooth. And I'm very happy and honored to be on GameSense once again, working with a very professional and fantastic crew you guys have.
Awesome. Well, sorry we left our fantastic crew at home today, but we're here for you instead. So thank you so much for that. Cool. All right. Well, thank you for that, Nick. And so just to let everybody know, the show goes till 10 o'clock tonight. And then after our show, as we do every week, we'll be having our 20 or 30-minute Q&A session with the chat in Twitch. If you have a question for us, send it via our Twitch chat bot. To send a question, just type ! the letter Q, followed by your question, and our chat bot will automatically index it and send it to us. And if we like it, we'll answer it on air. So with that said, all the stuff we say on here, it's our opinions. And we don't take ourselves too seriously, and we hope that you don't either. And if you don't like the things we have to say, go out there and prove us wrong, because it'll be great. This evening, we'll be covering the ins and outs of the two district championships happening this weekend in Cheney, Washington for the PNW, and in Indianapolis for the Indiana District Championship. But first, let's get everybody's impressions on the week that was, week number 5. Nick, why don't we start with you? Tell us one thing you saw this past week that you want to talk about.
I was at the Finger Lakes Regional as a co-MC, and the Finger Lakes Regional, being a Week 5 event, which is rare, was extremely competitive in the sense that most of the teams had already played an event, and the scores were so high and tight that a team in an alliance in the semifinals scored 193 points and did not move on to the finals.
Wow! Damn, that's crazy. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for sharing that. Next up, let's go to Ty. What do you think? What was your thoughts from this past week?
So I think the theme of last week was that teams actually got to the point where they needed those center cans in order to score enough points to move on. And that became the central theme. It became what we've been talking about since we saw this game revealed, and teams were finally able to say, hey, I can cap more than 3 stacks, and those guys can too. So, oh crap, the 4 most important game elements are now in the middle of the field, free game for anybody that can get them.
Good insight. Evan, tell us your bit here.
To go with what Ty said, I think we saw the first instances of teams actually not just needing the cans from the center, because we saw a little bit of that in week 4, but actually needing to fight for them. And I think it was very clear to me that it was really the onus is on sort of the underdog alliances, the ones with the fewer firepower, that they had to go out and meet whoever was going for the cans, because it was really their only chance to win.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. And we'll be talking more about that in just a few minutes, too. Naveed, what are your thoughts on this past week? I see you've got a little bit of blue behind you today, a little blue screen.
I do. It looks good, I think. One thing that I definitely want to mention on that note, though, is utility is starting to become more prevalent. Not only is that can on the step important, starting to really see, at least out at our event right now, where that third role at district champs and at worlds is probably going to be filled. And it's not necessarily you're going to be able to find somebody who's going to be a strong landfill focused bot, or that you're going to get all of the roles that you need filled, but that third robot, you really want them to be able to do a handful of tasks and or things on the field that aren't going to interact with the rest of your alliance.
Cool. That's good insight. And sort of just to take it home with me, I'm going to talk a little bit more personally And week 5, my team, we traveled all the way across the country to lovely Philomath, Oregon. I just want to say that to all the people who we met out there, it was great to meet you. I talked to a lot of GameSense fans, and you were all. It was awesome to hear from our lovely public. And just to say something about the PNW, everybody was so nice. Like, I haven't met that many nice people since we went to Canada. So great time. Thank you guys for having us out there, and thanks Canada as well. All right, well, with that, we're going to go to our first topic of the night. Let's talk about the week that was and who performed well. We're going to start off with Evan on our top showings for the week.
Well, I don't think we can get away from mentioning 368 in Hawaii. They are probably the last of the top teams to play their first event in week 5, and then they're playing again next weekend. And they had a little bit of a rocky start, but they definitely poured it on strong, and just an absolute monster of a landfill specialist. They had some code issues. They finally got those worked out. I'm really excited to see them in the mix at Silicon Valley week next week. They were putting up 3 stacks with cans on top, full stacks with 6 from the landfill. They're right up there with 987 and 2056 and 118 and all the rest of those great landfill robots. So that was a great performance from them. 1730 Team Driven went out to Colorado, and they had a great event paired up with 1619 Up a Creek Robotics, and just amazing scores coming out there. And 1806 SWAT went to I believe it was Oklahoma. So those are some really good performances, strong performances out of teams who had little rough patches, both 1730 and 1806 together, making it to finals and then losing earlier this season. So great to see them qualify, and just phenomenal performances. There was also some great stuff in Connecticut. I don't know, Francis or Ty, if you guys want to talk about that a little bit. Either of you guys. Well, I guess Francis didn't get to watch Hartford.
I was in Oregon, so
Yeah.
I only caught a little bit of it on the. That's the one thing about Oregon I don't like, is there's no data anywhere in the rural areas. But Ty, did you catch much of Connecticut?
Well, much like you, I was in New Hampshire, and that's the one thing about New Hampshire I don't really like, is there's no data anywhere in the rural areas. But no, I kept up on the Blue Alliance, and what we really found was that 195 and 230 just took it to the house. And what you found, or what we really noticed, was what basically it became 230's, theme, so to speak, to rank not number 1, but get picked by the number 1 team, and then just completely take them and skyrocket their averages and take it to the win. 230's got a very consistent capping robot. They did a great job this week.
Yeah. The other thing I'd like to say about Hartford is that 177 improved a whole lot from their first appearance this year. But unfortunately, it wasn't enough. As it stands right now, they look like they're going to be on the outside of the district championships, and quite possibly not going to the championship this year at all.
And that would be the first time in a long time, wouldn't it?
Well,
2012,
2 years.
right?
Yeah, 2012.
Yeah.
But before that was very, very long time. So.
Well, before that, they were just on Einstein, so...
On Einstein every single year. So, but you know what? The robot's looking good. I'm going to be looking forward to seeing them at the Connecticut State Championship, and definitely going to be looking forward to hopefully seeing them at some other off-season events this coming year. So,
yeah, it's a little unfortunate there. They had a really rough first event, ranked second from last, didn't get picked. They only got 10 points out of it. And then they go into Hartford, which is a phenomenally stacked event, get the number 7 seed captain, and put together an amazing alliance that really almost made it to finals, but didn't quite make the cut. So, yeah.
Yeah. Nick, you were at the Finger Lakes Regional. I think you were pretty close to the field for that event. Tell us what your thoughts on that event were.
Yeah, the Finger Lakes Regional was really entertaining, both on and off the field. As for on-field stuff, the finals went to 3 matches, and the final match was decided by 3 points. And the winning alliance of 40-39, 30-15, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the third team. They were strong. They were the number 7 alliance, and they were putting up increasingly better scores all the way through to the finals, and they took down 340, 174, and once again, I'm blanking on the third bot because I've had a crazy busy week.
It's all right.
but
It's on the
they-
Blue Alliance. Check it out. We love all the
Yeah.
bots equally.
Definitely check it out. But Finger Lakes was definitely a lot of fun and definitely competitive, and it was one of those events where there were so many good teams that nobody knew who was going to win the event after alliance selection. There was no clear-cut winner.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Those are always the ones that are the most fun to watch. You know. Cool. So I think there's another powerhouse alliance that kind of got together this past weekend. 148 and 987. Naveed, do you want to just touch on those guys a little bit?
Sure. I think everybody expected to see them get back together, and it was only a matter of who was going to get to pick who. And I saw something kind of crazy this weekend. I didn't get to see it as much. Maybe Evan can talk about it a little bit more. But 148 in a match scored 0 points and still managed to score that high. Did you get to catch that match?
I actually missed that match entirely. I believe it was either some kind of code issue or whatever that they were sitting dead and didn't have partners that could cover for them. But yeah, that shows you just how far ahead of the field
Yeah.
you were. When you can score 0 points and still be number 1 seed, and Las Vegas was not a shallow regional. It was very deep, very strong. 987 also came out strong. They had their own consistency issues occasionally, but the first match they came out, they put up 2 stacks. They did their 3-tote auto, put up 2 stacks of 6 from the landfill. Then went and did co-op, and then it might have just been 1 stack of 6, but they did co-op, and then they came back and did another stack of 6. Just a phenomenal machine, vastly improved from what we saw week 1 in Dallas.
Wow, that's
So,
kind of scary, isn't it, to see that?
Yeah, it is, and I'm scared to see what they bring to champs because they're pushing 11-14 realm right now if they
Wow.
can get that consistency down. Yep.
Yeah, and I think one thing to bring up is that 148 came out of the gate week 1, putting up 3 and 4 stacks of 6, and some of them, even capping 3 and 4 stacks of 6. And then they came up this time, and they have I think it's a 2-container 3-tote auto, and they were still able to put all that up. I think they're still hands down the best human-loaded robot out there. Because 11-14, while they may be faster for that one stack of 6, they're only using it
Yeah.
to supplement. They're not using it as their primary strategy.
Yeah, I think 148 is the only pure human load robot that is capable of putting up 4 stacks of 6, at least that we've seen so far.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Speaking of putting all these stacks up, we had, as we talked about a little bit earlier, cans are starting to become more important as we go forward. And this sort of brings these two together. In Hawaii this weekend, we had our first serious can battle going on. Ty, do you want to talk about
Yes.
how the can wars have begun?
Yes. So as I said at the beginning of the event, or at the beginning of the show, teams are actually getting to the point where alliances are actually getting to the point where they can use more than just the 3 cans they're given at the start of the event. So what happens is when you get to the finals and you get to later on in the qualification or in the elimination matches or the playoffs, then those center cans become very, very important. And as a result, you get robots that start fighting for these cans, and it's awesome. So if you haven't seen or you didn't see or hear, 359 went up against 610 with their center can auto. And they go for the center cans. So there's 2 on the left, 2 on the right. They went for the center 2. 359 backs up and goes to grab for it. 610, unfortunately, their robot has an arm that goes out behind the cans and then drags them forward onto their side of the field. So then they basically went out behind the cans, hooked onto 359, and then 359 and 610 just pulled on each other for the entirety of auto, tore each other apart, and I believe 610 was given a red card for that match, right? Although it doesn't seem to show in the match results on the on Blue Alliance.
Yeah, they announced a red card. It actually didn't end up mattering. 368 just put the Alliance on their back and ended up outscoring Blue Alliance. 610 and 359 were actually still locked in and entangled for a significant amount of time after auto. So there was, I believe there was actually a red card issued. I know 610 was carrying a yellow card in the second final match, but it didn't get put to a 0 score. So, yeah, procedural issue didn't actually affect anything.
So is that like our first red card we've seen for robot-to-robot contact this season?
I believe so. And the interesting thing, and I don't know if this is how it was supposed to be ruled or not, but the red card was actually not for, or it wasn't announced that it was for contacting a robot on the other side of the step intentionally or strategically. It was actually called as a G26 for entanglement and damage to a robot.
Oh.
So it was deemed egregious, and actually, I don't think it quite shows it in the video because it only shows auto. But when 359 and 610 finally break free, both robots ended up broken. Part of 359's claw ended up in 610's robot,
And they didn't find it for like a couple matches, right?
well, they didn't find it until they went back to 610's pit because they ended up swapping out their arms for the second match, and it was still attached to 610's arm. So, yeah.
Well, they weren't in an inspected configuration then, so that might open a whole new can of worms.
Actually, this is probably the most aggressive form of cheese kicking I think I've ever seen.
True, but these weren't the only can battles we saw over the weekend. Although it was certainly the most violent, I think. We had some other ones. I don't know. Nick, did you guys see any real can battles at Finger Lakes?
As far as autonomous goes, the only team that was consistent at getting cans in auto was 340. But we did see some teleop can battles. It was kind of funny. The two teams that were doing it, they always seemed to be going for the same can, even though there were other options available at that time, which I thought was kind of strange. But other than that, the center cans didn't play a huge factor in most of the matches, but they were, if two of them were scored or two of them were stolen, at least one of them was scored by the end of the match.
Interesting. Cool. So, do we want to touch on any of the other can battles real quick? Anybody?
Yeah, we had 225 and 365 went at it. And then this is where I stumble and forget something.
Is that Upper Darby?
Yes, at Upper
Yeah.
Darby.
Yeah.
And this is actually kind of interesting. So we've been discussing about how to be the fastest can burglar out there possible. And this video shows that if you don't have positive engagements on those cans, then you can get bounced right out. Well, Not this video, because this is 5. Oh, here we go. So if you watch the video, 365 actually gets it first, but because the other team had the better hooks, they went and stole it right from under their hooks.
Nope.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
And so my question then on that front is, do you think we'll start seeing more guards or shields on can grabbers to keep other teams from being able to enter a can?
Well, now that you mentioned it.
I think we
Now that you
might.
mention it,
It's a little bit difficult just based on the geometry. If you've got something that extends, you might be able to do it, but it's pretty close as is. I think what we're going to see is teams really starting to tighten up the their sequence, right? Because Mo gets in the can first, and they actually had plenty of time to drive away, but they're waiting for it to settle out for consistency's sake. And so I think, had they run an auton mode that drove away quicker, they may have gotten those cans off before 225 even got a chance to get in. So I think we'll see some of that as teams start actually tuning theirs.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, well, I think we had a whole episode on it last week. I think we've talked about it a lot this week, and I think that the more important and cool thing that's happening this week is probably our district championships. Nick, your team is in Indiana, and you've been hanging around Indiana all week, all season. You've been helping out with districts there. Tell us, how are districts going in Indiana? What have they done for the area? Is it good, bad, indifferent?
Districts are probably the best thing that could have happened for Indiana FRC teams. Typically in Indiana, the last 5 or 6 years, you've had a couple robots who are decent, and then the rest who really struggle to put points on the board. And this year, with double the matches that teams can play, it has really, really helped to bring the bottom floors of competition up towards the top, and also help the top stretch their legs a little bit further. I mean, instead of having 3 robots who are potentially able to win the state championship this year, there's at least 8 or 9 who are definitely in the running for it. I mean, it's really hard to say who's going to go out and win the state championship this weekend, even though there are plenty of good teams. I mean, there are teams who, like 234, who went to 3 events, who won 2 district events, and really benefited from the stick time. Other teams who went and took advantage of the cheaper events are 829, 1024, 1501, and 1529. Speaking of 1024, they're really aggressive and hungry this year after failing to qualify. Yeah, being the bridesmaid a lot last year and failing to qualify for the World Championship. They're definitely hungry, and they're doing everything in their power to make sure that they qualify for the World Championship this year. There's a lot of other strong teams too, like 5188. Their coach is actually an alumni of 469, and they're a very skilled human player-based stacker, usually good for 2, sometimes 3 stacks of 6 per match with cams. And there's a couple of teams in the running too, like 135, who had a really good showing at the Kokomo event. They went out and won it along with the Chairman's Award, but they're looking to redeem themselves a little bit after the Purdue District event. But overall, teams have definitely benefited from a lot more time to play with the robots in this event, or in this state, for sure.
I think we've also seen that we're also right now, all of us here are in districts. Naveed, I think your team's definitely seen that this past season. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest storylines for PNW this year is the floor also here is certainly coming up. Seeing last year a lot of defense able to be played, we saw a lot of teams figuring out how to contribute to the matches, and I'm kind of curious as to why we're seeing some of those teams that made an impact last year not being able to put up as many points, and it might just be that last year's game certainly helped some of those teams.
Yeah, one thing that's really interesting that I noticed in general this year that I think is a benefit of districts specifically this year. Last year we saw a lot of teams come out, with their robot, and it really was a matter of the gameplay and the strategy changed throughout the season as teams got better at working with each other and playing in match, right? But there wasn't a whole lot of robot innovation, etc. going on. This year, it's very much a robot-centric game. Yeah. As far as, the strategies are all based around what robots are capable of. And we've seen, like week 1, you were a phenomenally strong contender if you could put up 1 stack of 6 every match, right? That doesn't really cut it anymore. You're good, but at district championship level, even at some of the later districts, that's not a number 1 seed lock-in.
Mm-hmm. Right? I think that's something phenomenal to highlight is how much teams have grown this year, not only in terms of learning how to play the game, but lots of modifications, even for teams at the lower end of the tier.
Yeah, and as you sort of mentioned that, I know that Indiana only had 3 districts. How did that play into things that went on there? And were there did anybody actually go to all 3 of the districts? Because it sounds like totally feasible.
Yeah, 234, 829, 1024, 1501, and 1529 attended all 3 events.
I see a correlation there somehow.
And what was really interesting is that these teams had an opportunity at their 3rd event to deny other teams points.
Yeah.
And that happened in the sense that 234 and 1024 paired up and they went and won Purdue, which you could argue slightly deflated certain teams' rankings. And we knew that when there's only 49 teams in the state and excuse me, and three events to go to, that you're going to see a lot of overlap on these teams, and it's very easy for you to attend a few events and deflate each other's scores, which is kind of an interesting metagame that happens in a small district.
Yeah.
And it is worth mentioning that because 234 and 1024 are both near the top of the Indiana rankings, even though they're denying points, it's not as big of a difference as if it's a team that's lower down, because really they're moving the bar down. But what they're effectively doing is removing potential points for the teams at that third event that were playing their second event. So they may have had an opportunity to move up in the rankings had 1024 and 1024 and 234 not been there.
Yeah, I
But-
mean, it's not like a team came halfway across the country and seeded in the top 8, then made it to semifinals, That would be crazy. Sorry.
So, Nick, what does 234 have to do to win? Because I think if we look, we notice that 234 actually put up the highest co-op score ever put up this year, and that could affect how their seeding is going. So it's looking like they can put up a consistent 1 or 2 stacks of 6, one definitely, but is that going to be enough to get them that number 1 seed and pick the next best robot?
Well, truth be told, you can tell by their very big gap in co-op points between them and everybody else that they have a good shot at still being the number 1 seed at the Indiana State Championship. Granted, that doesn't mean that other teams haven't figured out the co-op game too. Yes, co-op is hard, but most of those top teams have the ability to get a 300-ish co-op score through the course of the state championship. But there have been flashes where 234 has put up co-op and still done 2 noodle 42-point stacks.
Wow, that's pretty fast.
Once they nail down their stacking consistency a bit more, then I have no question that they could potentially be the number 1 seed again at the Indiana State Championship.
And then if they do that, who do you see them working best with? Or they worked with what? 135 they went with, and 1024 as well?
Yeah, either of those two would be good. As I mentioned before, 135 had a really strong showing at Kokomo. They were good for 2 stacks of 5 with a noodle and container in many matches. 1024 at Kokomo had consistency issues. Unfortunately, I did not actually see 1024 compete at the Purdue event.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually busy running the Cybertooth team while other mentors were out and about.
Details and priorities.
Something about that, but it's hard to say. I mean, there could be a team like 5188 could come out and have the ability to build 3, even 4 stacks. Who knows? With having a shorter state championship, we have the ability to have unbag time this week as teams.
Oh.
So who knows what people are going to do to the robots this week before we show up in Indianapolis on Thursday night.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you for your insight on Indiana. That's a lot of information. I know it's right now it's a small district, and hopefully with people like you and all the other fine folks in India, it'll grow to be big. Come soon. All right. Next comes the one that I know some of the other people on the show have been chomping at the bit to talk about. That's the PNW District Championship. This time in lovely Cheney, Washington. That's somewhere out east. Let's go to Evan real quick. Tell us your thing.
Sweet. Well, I just wanted to touch on what Nick was saying and do a little bit of a compare contrast here. 234 very clearly one of the top dogs in Indiana, and very heavily invested in co-op. Their co-op game is probably one of the strongest in the country right now. Whereas in Pacific Northwest, none of the top teams do co-op at all of the top 5 or 6. You start getting down a little bit below that, you start getting into 4911 and some of the other strong teams, and they do have co-op in their bag of tricks, and they regularly rely on that for a match strategy. But certainly 4488 Shockwave, Skunkworks 1983, CPR 3663, 955 and 1318 are personally the kind of the top 5 that I would consider right now. All very, very strong teams. Yeah. They're very strong stackers, most of them human load, and none of them do co-op on any kind of regular basis. Yeah. A couple of them don't even have the capability. So kind of an interesting interesting contrast there. Naveed,
The only
you've
two
got-
I can think of, 2907 Lions. They did it consistently at both of their district events, and 948. But again, neither of them managed to win an event. They put up some serious points, and it helped them seed well. But the two of them, that's pretty much the only that come to mind for me as well.
Huh. So that sort of brings us kind of to the big players in the Pacific Northwest. Evan mentioned a few of them: 4488, of course, 1983. Maybe a number people haven't heard a lot of is 955. I saw them up in Philomath. They're pretty good. They can put up 2 stacks of 6 with cans and noodles. Naveed, tell us a little bit more about who else is good in the PNW and who to watch out for when they build alliances this coming Saturday.
Well, I think on that note, when we're talking top tier, it would definitely have to be some of those teams that came out of Philomath this weekend. And I think we got a video that shows 1983 and 955. Hey.
You said it, but
I don't know. For me, I thought Auburn was better, but I might be a little bit biased. So this match, I think, is a really great one because you see 1983 and 955 putting up some really big points, but I was impressed to see how close these finals were, all things considered, because 2550 and 2990, the two of them both definitely have the ability to put up those big stacks. And at any other event, I don't think anybody would have been able to come as close as these two did to matching 1983 and 955's firepower. And as Evan said, there's really not very many teams outside of the rest of that list. I would say probably one more, and that being 4061. 4061 played with Shockwave out at Central Washington, and their first event out at West Valley for 4061 was a little bit rough. They have a very unique design, and they always go unique. But I expect to see them stepping up the game even more since Central, and they'll probably be in that top tier as well. An interesting thing to note when we were talking about co-op not being so heavy in this game, I think is also kind of a direct correlation to the fact that we don't have very many teams out here that made auto a big priority. 948 being one that we mentioned being a strong co-op bot, chooses to do auto as part of, or chooses to do co-op as part of their auto strategy, in the fact that once you've already got those 3 totes at the beginning of the match stacked and ready to go, it just kind of makes sense to play into that strategy where you use them. 2046 was also looking pretty good as far as the auto goes, getting that 3 tote fairly consistently at their last event, and I'm expecting to see that help them out a little bit come district champs. I think landfill is pretty weak, and I think that's also kind of a general consensus around the world, honestly. I mean, there's some really, really strong top tier, god tier robots that are able to pull it off. But out here, we've got 1318, 2471, and 3574. 3574 at their event last week at Auburn did a great job. They were able to put up a big stack by themselves, and 2471, while we're talking landfill, I think we also kind of need to fit that utility in there with error code 1425 out at Wilsonville. 2471 did a phenomenal job being able to pull those totes out of the landfill, but it requires somebody who can cap. And when you've got the ability to put up this many totes, utility is going to be huge, and we're starting to see that tier emerge, and I think that's going to really define who moves on to the semifinals and who gets to the finals. So you've got 4911, who consistently were playing with 3663 2 events together, and 3663 was able to benefit from 4911 being able to cap stacks. Error code 1425 looking great at it in Wilsonville. They added some things out at Auburn, and they were trying to play the can game as well. 1425 is going to be a really nice addition at district champs to somebody's alliance because they have the ability to do a whole lot.
Yeah, actually, kind of as you sort of talk about that, Nick sort of mentioned earlier that there's a lot of human player robots in Indiana. The PNW looks pretty mixed. So what do you see as being like an alliance, or what does anybody think about an alliance? Like, what kind of alliance would you need to win these district championships? What would be on these teams to come to work well with everybody?
I'll jump in here because I think this is going to be really interesting. And I know we got to move on quick, so I'll try and keep it short. But we've got these top tier robots that really kind of can do everything in terms of they get the cans, they stack the cans, and they put up large stacks. But we haven't seen it at any real district events yet because the field hasn't really been deep enough. A little bit with 1425 and 2471 pairing up and getting to finals. But I think at district champs, the field is deep enough that you're going to see some lower seed alliances that have the ability to put together sort of cohesive alliances where any given individual robot isn't a power, but they can really put up lots of points on the backs of tote stacks, and somebody else goes and caps it. It'll be interesting, I think, because I think the top teams, if they do not plan for the ability to get more cans off the center, if you're looking at four stacks of 6 up there, that alone may not be enough. You got to have something else. So it's going to come down. Those third robots are going to be important, and there's going to be a very deep field.
And I think even as deep as it's going to be, I think there's going to be a little bit of a drop-off at district champs in Pacific Northwest, at least, because those top few alliances are probably going to be those strong stackers. They're probably going to be the teams that can put up those 6s. And then we start seeing a little bit more utility on the reach around for those third robots. And the way I see it right now is there could be some pretty big fights in the semifinals and into the finals where we're seeing some of those teams that have the ability to get those extra cans and to maybe put up more stacks, but with those extra bins that might be able to fight those top 2 robots who can't get as strong of a third pick.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we move on to the rest of first this week, let's do real quick. I'm going to hit it back to you, Nick. Nick, who's your bet to win the Indiana District Championships, and who's your bet for who's your one bet for Chairman's Award? Because there's only 3 people eligible in Indiana.
Something tells me, as much as I love 234 and 1024, something tells me that they're going to get together, but somebody's going to take them down in 3 matches in the finals. Ooh. Who that is, I'm not sure. It could be a mix of 1501 and 5188. It could be somebody we're not sure of. Who knows? As for chairmans, I'd say 234 is a lock for winning district chairmans. The other 2 eligible teams are 135 and 4272. While they're great teams, I'm not sure that their program is nearly as strong as 234's. Yeah.
All right, cool. Now, Naveed, to put you on the hot seat because you're our expert here on this stuff. Who's your bet to win the district championship, and who are your top 2 teams you think to win the Chairman's Award?
I think this one's tough. Steph and I did a lot of chatting last year about who we thought were going to pull it off throughout the entire season, and then again at district champs, and we didn't quite hit the mark. It's a tough one because even if we know a lot of what some of those teams have been able to do, I don't know how they stack up next to each other. But one I definitely want to mention, I just saw their video a few days ago, 3574, the High Techers, a team that I've known for quite some time now. Phenomenal video. If you haven't seen it yet, probably one of my favorite chairman's videos of all time.
Nice.
1540, the Flaming Chickens. They are always a favorite for chairmans down here. Nobody really can match the amount of community outreach they do. I mean, they started Girls' Generation down in Oregon. They host their own off-season engineering competition and challenge, and they just have been a staple in the Northwest since the beginning. I see a handful of others chomping at the bit for that third pick, but I definitely would have to say those 2 are my favorite to move on.
Cool. What about, not to put you on the seat again, but what about actually the robot winning tournament part?
Yeah, I think that one is pretty easy. We've got 4488 and 1983 that are almost at a tier of their own at the top, and knowing that 1983 debuted their can grabber this last weekend in Philomath, and seeing today Shockwaves, which is almost as fast, having the 2 of them out on that field, if one of them seeds first, which I think is very likely, I see the 2 of them as probably being able to take it from the rest of the folks.
I'm not so sure about that. It's going to be a really tight at the top.
Hashtag modesty.
Yeah. If there's ever a year, I really don't know. I'll say I agree. Shockwave, I think, is probably the favorite, just because they're really the only team out here that can put up six or three stacks of six, if they got the time. But outside of that,
I was going to say too. I know that at Philomath, 955 was very consistent at doing 2 stacks, and 1983 was very consistent at doing 2 stacks of 6. These are both with 6 with cans capped. 1983 was a little bit better. They could do two stacks plus between 2 and 4 extra totes. So the difference between those robots is not a lot. So I'll be really interested to watch this weekend. I think I might just put on my game day full screen on just the Pacific Northwest this weekend. No offense, Indiana, but love you anyway.
No
Right,
offense,
well,
but yeah.
But no offense, but I like PNW better. So anyway, with that, we're going to skip right over to the shout-outs for our show. Let's start off with, let's go first to Ty. Ty, give us your shout-outs for this week.
All right, my shout-outs this week go to the 2 teams that are most likely to win their event. That's 1114 and 2826 Wave Robotics. 2826, I think, once they get things up and running with that potential for a 32-point, guaranteed 28-point auto, they're going to be in the running for the best human player robot out there. They're going to be right up 148's alley. And then 1114 is just on another planet. So they'll take that, they'll jump on with 2056 and take it to the win again.
All right, bold predictions. Let's go next to Naveed. What do you have?
I'm going to branch out of the PNW this week. I do have one, but one of my favorite robots this year, gotta say, has been 2451. They've just done a phenomenal job. At their first event, they came out with their big fridge that was kind of hard to tell what it did from a distance, but they get their 3-tote auto. They probably get that co-op up faster than anybody out there. And on top of being able to do that so fast, they're easily able to get up 2 6 stacks and time for some more almost, and I expect them to do really well this weekend. 3683, Team Dave. Amazing team up in Canada, and they tried their hardest up against 1114 and 2056 last time. They might find themselves in that same position again, and it would be a shame to see a robot like this get 2 finalist showings this year, but make no mistake, 2 finalist medals or not, when they come to champs, they're gonna be pushing some serious points up in the division level. And last shout out definitely is gonna have to be 2471 in the Northwest. I'm really excited to see what they've done. They made some big changes. Just showed off their new 2-can grabber today, in fact, and I think that not only with the capability of them to make those big stacks from the landfill, being able to have that additional utility and some of the new changes they've made, they're going to be a top contender.
Cool. Well, utility is important, especially as we get closer toward the championship. Evan, give us your shout-outs for the week.
I only have one. My shout-out goes to 624 Kryptonite competing at Lone Star. They had the rough start week 1 in Dallas, ended up getting paired with 118 and showing a very strong in playoffs and winning the event eventually. And then they went out to Utah and had another incredibly strong showing, pulled the #1 seed, won that event as well. I'm really excited to see what they can do at Lone Star. It's right before championships. They work really, really hard. I expect them to have a couple of new tricks.
Cool. My 2 shout-outs for the week are a little non-traditional. There are no teams I'm shouting out today. But first I want to send a shout-out to Jess Boucher, because she contacted us to ask everybody in first, if you're going to the championship and you're looking to maybe volunteer, you should do it, because they need official scorers at the championship. Those are the guys that get to sit next to the field, stand next to the referees and the tablets, and count the totes during the matches. They are in desperate need of them. So if you're at all interested, go to VIMS, sign up for it, go to the championship. Trust me, it's a lot of fun. And what could be better than being on the floor at championship watching every single match of your subdivision field? Should be pretty cool. My second shout out is to a gentleman I met at the Philomath district. I didn't catch his name, but he did end up having to wear a costume. I heard from my teammates that the story was that this poor gentleman missed one of his team meetings. He was on 5085. He's on 5085. I think we got a picture of him coming up right about now. Yep. He missed one of his team meetings and instead had to spend the entire regional in a trash can dancing. So shout out to that kid because he spent the whole regional in a trash can dancing. Like the whole 2 full days of the district event.
I like how you say it as if dancing makes it worse. Like,
Well,
if you're in a trash can, you might as well dance.
I guess that's true. That's what I always say, right? So shout out to that kid and shout out to everybody else in Philomath, especially all the people I met out there who are GameSense fans. It was great to meet you. You know who you are. Cool. So before we end up, Nick, tell us your shout outs for the week.
Well, everybody else took the week 6 shout-outs that I wanted to take, so I thought I would do a week 5 shout-out. A big shout-out to the Finger Lakes Regional, one of the Finger Lakes Regional champions and the Chairman's Award winner, Team 4039. They have built a program up in 4 short years that has gone from a super rookie to a serious contender in Canada. Their reveal video song is still stuck in my head, but they have got first right. And they're one of those teams that probably should have a few more blue banners in their closet, but they compete in Canada against some other really great teams. But their chairman's video is fantastic, and their chairman's program and team as a whole is fantastic too. So big shout out to them. Keep doing what you're doing, and keep striving and keep believing.
Cool. All right. Well, you know, they say Canada's just like Michigan. A lot of really, really great teams up there, even though some of them really kind of, even though 11, 14, 2056 get all the highlights, there's a lot of really great teams up there. Mm-hmm. All right. Cool. Well, with that, I think that'll bring us to the end. Oh, actually, we got one quick shout out here. No, we don't. Sorry. At the end of that'll bring us to the end of our show for the week. Thank you guys for watching. We're sorry we started off a little bit late, and thank you guys for watching on a different day than normal. Just to let everybody know, FRC Top 25, they moved their show start to 10 o'clock. So if you're interested in watching them, they're on right now. Go ahead and check them out on Twitch. They're there. Otherwise, we're going to be here. We're taking a short break. We're going to go off air for about 5 or 10 minutes. Then we're going to come back online and answer some of the questions you guys have for us via the chat. Again, if you have a question for us, type in !Q followed by your question, and our chat bot will send it to us automatically. We'll go over the questions, find the best ones, and answer them for you on air. Have a little loose, fun talking time with everybody. But with that, I want to say one more time, thank you a huge amount to our returning guest, Nick. Nick, you were here last year on the IRI episode. You came here this week to talk about Indiana, and it was great to have you on, and you've been a fantastic guest both times.
Well, thank you again for having me. As always, you guys do a bang-up job of a professional and well-polished show. And you guys are definitely one of the groups of people that really make First look good. So thanks again for having me.
Warm fuzzies back to you, man.
Yay. Yes, indeed. Back to the same thing to you, Nick. And we would love to have you on the show again, but we have a cap of 2, so you're never coming back. But that's
When did we have that rule in place?
Right now. No, I'm just kidding. All right, cool. So with that, we're going to take a quick break, go off air, do our Q&A. Again, if you're interested, FRC Top 25 is live and kicking right now. So you can go ahead and check over to them. Otherwise, if you're watching the video, thank you for watching. If not, stay tuned for a few minutes. Bye-bye now, everybody.